I like it when it's raining, I don't think that it's wrong. It means that I can stay inside and write this little song.
Or shall I stay inside and do some watercolour painting? Yeah, let's have a crack at that.
Let's make the very best of things, you know, the way we should. Sometimes circumstances can create just discontent, like when the bills keep coming and you have to pay the rent. Your car starts making noises, the mechanic rubs his hands. The sun goes right behind the cloud and then the gloom descends. I like it when it's raining, I don't think that it's wrong. It means that I can stay inside and write this little song. I hope it makes you happy. I want you to be...
I'm going to start with this mount board, which is A3 size. There's 2 pieces of A4, and then mark the corners so I know where I've got to paint up to. And in fact, I shall mark another line about 1 centimetre outside of this, just to make absolutely sure. The first stage in this painting is just to mark out the rough outline of where the mountains, the sea is going to go. So these are the thirds I'm looking at now, and just this point, lower right third, is where I'm going to put some figures on some rocks in the foreground and a horizon across there. The rest I'm sort of making up as I go along. So I'm going to wet the whole of the paper first and do some wet in wet of applying the colour to the sky, and then as I do it there will be a mirror image in the water in the foreground. The watercolour paints on my palette are squeezed out of tubes, and I let them dry a little bit so they don't make a mess, but I need to just run some water across the top of them all to get them fluid so I can use them. And here's some ultramarine blue. I won't name all the colours precisely, but this is blue going wet in wet. So the top is the sky and the bottom is where the sea, the water, will reflect it. So I'm doing the two things at the same time, but the whole of the paper is wet at the moment. Right, we're going to have a sunset, so this orange goes in next. I must be very careful here not to mix in with the blue, because it will just make it a mushy green. And so I've left a gap between the two areas, and with just 1 or 2 strokes I'll pull them together. That's another bit of yellow going in, top and bottom, sort of, as I say, mirror image. You have to realise at this point that the paint and the water will just make its own way, and this isn't what you see in the end. So with a little bit of a touch here and there, just push it along, let the paint work its way into the paper and work its magic. I want some more character in the sky, so I'm drying the brush and pulling it across and pulling the paint off the paper essentially, and then I will get tissue paper and pull off some more to make some sort of cloud effects. Always turn in the paper so you don't get a sort of a printed image of the pattern of the paper towel. You don't want that. Now, without overdoing it, these clouds need a bit of shadow underneath of them, and this is a common practice on this painting look. I'll get a wet brush, and then wherever there's a hard line, I come to it with a wet brush, and it'll take this hardness off the line and make it soft. I'll do this lots of times. I've used the hairdryer to dry the whole painting off. I'm now just checking the borders here are good for checking the paint colour. I want to put some mountains in the distance, Payne's grey and ultramarine blue. Again here I'm softening that bottom edge, and in fact I take a rather bit too much paint off here, but these can be corrected. I'll make another mistake as well, and if you're quick enough you can get away with it and get a correction made. Now, strictly speaking, I should have done the very distant mountains first, but I just feel that I wanted some more hills in the background, and if it overlaps this line, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go over this first mountain again, like this. So hopefully the back set of mountains is very dry. That's where we want a sharp edge. And now just mixing up a little bit more colour. A little bit of brown in there as well to make the colours a little bit more strengthened as we come forward away from the background. And as we come further forward to the mid-ground area, I can put some more shape into the mountains. So here's some more shadows going in. And with it wet in wet, the paint will move around and be reasonably effective. Again here, just taking out that bottom edge. I'm aiming for some sort of misty effect down by the water's edge. Now to put a reflection across. Whoops-a-daisy, didn't mean to do that. Right, that's the other mistake I told you of. But just leave it there for a minute. I'm putting a reflection of the mountains in the water, in the sea. And you can see I can just take that mistake out and get away with it while it's still wet. I'm going to put trees along the shoreline, so that's another way I can cover that up. So now I'll see if I can just cover up that catalogue of errors there with a wet, clean brush. And also clean the brush out and try and lift some of the paint out. So clean the brush, paint out, and away we go. So now let's head in with some trees. The colours become, there we go, just check the colour at the top, make sure it looks good. The colours become stronger as we get closer to, but there'll be two layers of colour here, I know. This is a sort of a mid-green. I'll put a stronger green in front of this as well, and also to make some shadows on the trees along the shoreline. Again, I'll have to do a mirror image and then try and maintain a misty line between as well. Change brushes here to a small one. This little dabbing action, you can get some nice sort of tree effects. They're still a bit blobby, so I'm going to use another brush as well later on. Now let's just put the reflections of those trees there. The reflections never need to be complete mirror image, just a suggestion is all we need to make it look realistic. Now I'm going to mix a deeper green to put on the front of those distant trees. I'm using blue and yellow and a bit of leaf green, I think it is, to get a darker colour. Just checking the colour on the top and then dabbing it in with this brush. It's one of my favourite brushes. It's a Sable number 6 brush. Aha, now we have a fan brush. Notice I'm pushing this one up. Sometimes if you push a brush against its line of its hairs, it has a more random effect, which is quite good. You can also use this brush like this on its edge, but I don't want it too high, so got to be careful with it. Now, while I'm doing this reflection in the water of the trees, I'm thinking it's a good idea sometimes, as a matter of principle, to cut through a horizon line. So some of those trees might have been made a bit bigger to cut through the line up into the sky. But it's okay, I'll leave it as it is for now. Now I just intend to put a bit more form, some shapes of the mountains with some shadows, and I'm also going to create some texture with a bit of plastic, basically, or it is the corner of an old credit card. So there's the paint on, and while it's still wet, get this piece of plastic and just scrape a little bit and reveal some of the shapes underneath, and it gets a nice sort of a texture which you can use for rocks. And now I'm going to do a foreground, a much darker colour here, with some colour in it. There's some brown in there as well, some burnt sienna. Just stretch it across so far. I'm mindful of where I'm going to put a couple of figures on these rocks. So again, the rocks will be marked with some textures, and then there will be reflections in the water below them as well. It's well worth practicing doing these figures. Basically, they're very, very simple. In the distance like this, they're just a very, very simple blob with a tiny head on the top. Don't make the head too big, it doesn't work. And in a moment I'll put some light and dark shade on it as well. Let's add a bit more of that dark around to help balance it all out. Always good fun to get the card mount in place and see what it's looking like. There's always a constant assessment of what you're doing. Do I need to do this, to do that? It's the point where artists sort of step back and have a look, a fresh look at what you've done and see if there's any adjustments need to be made. You need to have a sort of a wholesome view of it all. So I'm just checking those mountains at the back, adding a little bit more. Really, they should have been done at the very, very start, but I'm just getting away with it. The next trick here is to use an opaque white. This is one of my songwriting pens with some deep white in it. And just a little touch of highlight on these figures and a few bits and pieces on the rocks as well. Nurse, past the scalpel. With a knife I want to just clip the paper and create, this is lovely for creating sort of watery speckled effects. So it's a very sharp modelling knife, and you can feel it cutting into the paper as much as you want. A little bit in the foreground here as well. And so a final check with the mount around it. Yeah, and I'm pretty pleased with that at this point. So a bit of a tidy up. Always got a paper towel with me. That's the wet one I was using, and then another dry clean one to clean the palette off. This finished picture won't be this. I'm still going to look at it over possibly the next few days and decide if I need to add any more. It's a danger to add too much, but there again, I think I might take one of those trees above the mountain line and a little bit more texture in the rocks. Well, there you are. I hope you enjoyed that. certainly past the time of day. It's still raining outside. Where's the sunshine gone, for goodness sakes? Anyway, yeah, I've done one or two added pieces to the painting, as I suggested I might. So I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. And I'll see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.
I like it when it's raining. I don't think that is wrong. It means that I can stay inside and write this little song. I hope it makes you happy. I want you to feel good. Let's make the very best of things, you know, the way we should. Sometimes circumstances can create just discontent, like when the bills keep coming and you have to pay.